Hello and welcome to my 10-year forecast. How will the market for independent education look in 10 years? To look at a range of supply and demand determinants, I'll aim to provide a forecast for how the market for independent education might change over a 10-year period. This analysis excludes higher education and is only based on primary and secondary schools. In order to provide a relevant forecast, we'll be using the notion of ceteris paribus, meaning that other things will remain the same throughout the period. There are three sectors of education within Australia, represented in this graph. Private education currently holds 14% of the market, Catholic education 21% of the market, public education 65% of the market. For the latest ABS stats, independent schools hold 35% of the total market share. In Australia, this is around 510,000 students, or 3.5 million that are educated in secondary schools around Australia, and a total of 2 out of 5 students attending independent schools. In the last 10 years, independent education has had a significant rise. Overall, education enrolments throughout Australia increased by 1.4% from 2001 to 2011. However, in between the years of 1995 to 2005, independent and private education enrolments rose by 46%. This is compared to Catholic education, which rose by 1%, and public education, which rose by 2%. This rise continued through the GFC period from 2008 to 2011, as it maintained steady growth in enrolments by an average of 2% per annum. But what will the determining factors in shifting the demand in the future be? There are three determinants of demand for the independent education sector. The first is expectations. The average cost of independent education is $12,500 per annum. It's largely the expected that costs of independent education will rise, and this can be due to a decrease in government subsidies and ongoing public debate over funding, especially from reports such as the Gonski report, and also generally negative political views of independent education can be reinforced as politicians can be worried about the effects on voters. Personal taste. Independent education providers are not bounded by government regulations on what must be taught and when. Independent schools have the flexibility and capability to provide a more personalised education. With Australia's multiculturalism continuing to grow, we need a greater demand for independent education to provide a product that can cater for a variety of religious beliefs and cultural backgrounds. Population growth. Wherever population is expected to rise, it is expected so will the demand for private education, as public schools may not be able to cater or have a lack of resources and facilities that need to be provided. Taking into account these three main determinants of demand within education and with the increase in enrolments in independent schools over the previous decade and through the GFC, we can make the assumption that demand is relatively inelastic, represented in this graph. This second graph shows an increase in demand of independent education, by a demand curve shifting to the right for the reasons previously explained. This is represented by D2. What happens in the supply side of the education market? It's expected that supply of education will rise due to two main assumptions: the advances in technology. Recent increases in a variety of learning modes and educational technology means that potentially cheaper education alternatives may exist. This is concurrent with trends within higher education. Also, the number of sellers within the market. It is expected that there will be an increase in the mid to low cost independent education providers providing a service that is meeting the market equilibrium better. However, despite this perceived increase in supply, there will still be an expected shortfall of supply to demand. This is due to two reasons: the large amount of capital resource required to start a school and the lag time of physically building a school or running space. The supply curve is represented here. And what we will see is a slight increase in supply over a 10-year period. This is represented here through S2. Putting the demand and supply graphs together gives us this picture. The first graph represents our initial market equilibrium at Q1, being the equilibrium quantity, and P1, our equilibrium price. However, when we place our expected changes over the 10-year period of supply and demand, we get a very different picture. This is our next graph, where we can now establish a clear forecast for the independent education market, making the following assumptions. At 1, the demand for independent education will go up, represented by D2. And 2, the supply will rise slightly, but due to lag time and capital costs will not match the increase of the demand. In conclusion, over a 10-year period, demand for independent education will rise, as will the supply. However, the increase in supply will not match the increase in demand due to the lag time of construction and initial costs involved in establishing new schools. This means there will be an increase in the overall price of education over 10 years. This is represented in the following graph, illustrating the new point of market equilibrium. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation.
Created using Powtoon.